What is needed in order to be saved? Parable of the Good Samaritan. Now when the Son of Man comes in his majesty, accompanied by all the angels, he will sit on the throne of his glory, and all the peoples being gathered before him, he will separate them from one another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats, and he will place the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those who are on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take possession of the kingdom that has been prepared for you since the beginning of the world, for I was hungry and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me to drink. I was in need of shelter and you sheltered me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to see me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you to eat, or thirsty and gave you to drink? When was it that we saw you without a shelter and sheltered you, or without clothes and clothed you? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and came to visit you?" And the king will respond to them, "Verily I say to you, as often as you did it on behalf of the least of my brothers, it was to me that you did it." Next, to those who are on his left he will say, "Away from me, you who are accursed, go to the eternal fire that has been prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry and you did not give me to eat. I was thirsty and you did not give me to drink. I needed shelter and you did not shelter me. I had no clothes and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison and you did not visit me." Then these two will reply, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry, thirsty, or without shelter, or sick or in prison and we failed to help you?" But he will respond to them, "Verily I say to you, as often as you failed to render this assistance to one of the least of these, you failed to do it to me." And they will go to eternal punishment, and the righteous to eternal life. Matt 25:31-46. Then a doctor of the law stood up and said to him in order to test him, "Teacher, what must I do to possess eternal life?" Jesus answered him, "What is it that is written in the law? What have you read in it?" He responded to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." Jesus said to him, "You have answered well. Do so and you shall live." However, wanting to appear to be righteous, the man said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" And Jesus answering said to him, "A certain man was coming down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of thieves, who stripped him of his clothes, covered him with wounds and left him half dead. Afterward, it just so happened that a priest was coming down by the same way, and having noticed him, passed him by on the other side. A Levite, who also came to the same spot, saw him but passed by on the other side. But when a Samaritan, who was on a journey, came to where the man was and saw him, he was touched with compassion. He approached him and poured oil and wine on his wounds and bandaged them. And putting him on his own horse, he took him to an inn and cared for him. The following day he took 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take good care of this man, and whatever more you spend I will repay you when I return." Which of these 3 seems to you to have been the neighbor of the one who fell into the hands of the thieves? The doctor of the law responded to him, "The one who showed compassion on him." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." Luke 10 verses 25-37.
All of Jesus' morals are summed up in charity and humility, the 2 virtues contrary to selfishness and pride. In all his teachings, he points to these 2 virtues as being the way to eternal happiness. "Blessed are the poor in spirit," he said, meaning the humble, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. "Blessed are the pure in heart, blessed are the meek and the peacemakers. Blessed are the merciful, love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others what you want them to do unto you. Love your enemies, forgive offenses if you yourself want to be forgiven. Practice the good without ostentation. Judge yourselves before you judge others." Humility and charity are the things Jesus never ceased to recommend, and of which he himself gave the example. Pride and selfishness are the things he never ceased to combat. But he did more than recommend charity. He put it in clear and explicit terms as an absolute condition of future happiness. In the picture that Jesus portrays of the final judgment, it is necessary, as in many other cases, to separate symbol from allegory. To people such as the ones to whom he spoke, who were still incapable of understanding purely spiritual matters, he had to present physical imagery that was striking and capable of impressing them. To be better accepted, he could not depart very far from the form of the current established ideas, always reserving for the future the true interpretation of his words and the points that he could not explain clearly at the time. However, alongside the supplementary and figurative part of the picture, one idea predominates: the happiness awaiting the righteous and the unhappiness reserved for the wicked. In that final judgment, what will be taken into consideration in passing sentence? Upon what will the indictment be based? Will the judge ask if one has fulfilled this or that formality, or observed such and such outward practice? No. He will ask about one thing only: the practice of charity. And in passing sentence he will say, "You, who assisted your brothers and sisters, go on the right. You, who were harsh toward them, go on the left." Will he inquire as to the orthodoxy of their faith? Will he make a distinction between those who believe in one manner and those who believe in another? No, for Jesus places the Samaritan, regarded as a heretic, but who showed love toward his neighbor, above the orthodox person who lacks charity. Jesus thus did not make charity only one of the conditions for salvation, but the sole condition. If there were other conditions to fulfill, he would have mentioned them. If he places charity on the first plane of the virtues, it is because charity implicitly entails all the others: humility, kindness, benevolence, indulgence, justice, etc., and because it is the complete negation of pride and selfishness.
The greatest commandment. But having found out that he had put the Sadducees to silence, the Pharisees got together, and one of them, who was a doctor of the law, came to ask this question of him in order to test him: "Master, what is the greatest commandment of the law?" Jesus replied, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. That is the greatest and first commandment. And here is the second, which is similar to that one: You shall love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets are contained in these two commandments." Matt 22:34-40.
Charity and humility, that is the sole path to salvation. Selfishness and pride, that is the path to perdition. This principle is formulated in precise terms in these words: "You shall love God with all your soul and your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets are contained in these two commandments." And so that there may be no mistake about the interpretation of loving God and one's neighbor, Jesus adds, "And this is the second commandment, which is similar to the first, that is, one cannot truly love God without loving one's neighbor, nor can one love one's neighbor without loving God." Thus, everything that is done against one's neighbor is also done against God. And since one cannot love God without practicing charity toward one's neighbor, all of humankind's duties are summed up in the maxim: without charity there is no salvation.
The need for charity according to St. Paul. Even if I were to speak all the languages of men and the language of the angels themselves, if I did not have charity, I would be only like a sounding gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I were to have the gift of prophecy and grasped all mysteries, and if I had a perfect knowledge of all things, and if I had all the faith possible to the point of moving mountains, if I did not have charity, I would be nothing. And if I were to distribute my belongings to feed the poor and delivered my body to be burned, if I did not have charity, none of this would be of any use to me. Charity is patient, it is kind and benevolent. Charity is not envious, it is not rash or reckless, it is not full of pride, it is not scornful, It does not look after its own interests. It does not take offense or become upset by anything. It does not suspect evil. It does not rejoice in injustice, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes for all things, endures all things. Now these three virtues remain: faith, hope, and charity, but among them, the most excellent is charity. 1 Cor. 13:1-7, 13.
St. Paul understood this great truth so profoundly that he said, "Even if I were to speak the language of the angels themselves, if I were to have the gift of prophecy and grasped all mysteries, if I had all the faith possible to the point of moving mountains, but did not have charity, I would be nothing." Among these virtues, faith, hope, and charity, the most excellent is charity. Hence, without any doubt, he places charity above faith itself, because charity is within everyone's reach, the ignorant and the learned, the rich and the poor, and because it is independent of any particular belief system. He does even more. He defines true charity. He shows that it is not only displayed in beneficence, but in the gathering of all the qualities of the heart, in goodness and benevolence toward one's neighbor.
Without the church there is no salvation. Without the truth there is no salvation.
While the maxim, "Without charity there is no salvation," is based on a universal principle and gives all God's children access to supreme happiness, the dogma "Without the church there is no salvation" is based not upon a fundamental faith in God and the immortality of the soul, a faith common to all religions, but upon the special faith in particular dogmas. It is exclusive and absolute. Instead of uniting God's children, it divides them. Instead of stirring them to love their brothers and sisters, it maintains and sanctions the strife among the sectarians of various denominations, which mutually regard one another as damned for all eternity, even though they might be relatives and friends in this world. By misunderstanding the great law of equality before the grave, it separates people from one another even in the realm of repose. The maxim, "Without charity there is no salvation," is consecrated to the principle of equality before God and freedom of conscience. With this maxim as a rule, all men and women are brothers and sisters, and whatever may be the way in which they worship the Creator, they hold out their hands to one another and pray for one another. With the dogma "Without the church there is no salvation," they anathematize one another, persecute one another, and live as enemies. The father does not pray for the son for the father, or the friend for a friend if they believe each other to be condemned forever. Therefore, this dogma is essentially contrary to the teachings of Christ and the law of the gospel. "Without the truth there is no salvation" would be the equivalent of "Without the church there is no salvation," and would be equally exclusive because there is not one single denomination that does not claim to be privileged with the truth. What person could boast of possessing the whole truth, when the circle of knowledge is increasing constantly, and ideas are being rectified each and every day? The absolute truth is shared only among spirits of the highest order, and earthly humankind could not pretend to belong to that order because it has not been given to it to know everything. Humans can aspire only to a relative truth proportional to their advancement. If God had made possessing the whole truth as an express condition for future happiness, this would be a sentence of general proscription, whereas all may practice charity, even in its broadest definition. In accordance with the gospel, Spiritism says that one can be saved whatever one's belief may be, provided one observes God's laws. It does not state, "Without Spiritism there is no salvation," and since it does not claim as yet to teach the whole truth, neither does it state, "Without the truth there is no salvation," a maxim that would divide instead of unite, and would perpetuate antagonism.
The Spirit's teachings. Without charity there is no salvation. The Spirit's teachings.
My children, the destinies of men and women on earth and in heaven are contained in the maxim, without charity there is no salvation. On earth, because in the shadow of this banner they will live in peace. In heaven, because those who have practiced it will find grace before the Lord. This motto is the heavenly light, the luminous pillar that guides them through the desert of life in order to lead them to the promised land. It shines in heaven like a saintly halo around the heads of the elect, and on earth it is engraved on the hearts of those to whom Jesus will say, "Go to the right, you who are blessed of my Father." You will recognize them by the fragrance of charity that they spread around them. Nothing expresses Jesus' thought better. Nothing sums up the duties of men and women better than this maxim of divine order. Spiritism could not prove its origin in any better way than by providing it as a rule, because it is the reflection of the purest Christianity. With such a guide, people will never become lost. So, my friends, apply yourselves to grasping its profound meaning and consequences, and to discovering for yourselves all its applications. Submit all your actions to the test of charity, and your conscience will respond to you. Not only will it help you to avoid wrongdoing, but it will lead you to practice the good, for a negative virtue is not enough. It is necessary to have an active one. In order to practice the good, the action of the will is always necessary, whereas in order not to practice wrongdoing, idleness and negligence are often enough. My friends, give thanks to God, who has allowed you to enjoy the light of Spiritism, not because those who possess this enlightenment are the only ones who will be saved, but because, in helping you to understand Christ's teachings more fully, it makes you better Christians. Therefore, make every effort so that when others observe you, they can say that the true Spiritist and the true Christian are one and the same thing, for all who practice charity are Jesus' disciples, whatever the denomination they belong to.
Paul, Apostle, Paris 1860.